Oh, wait a minute.
And welcome to Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co host, Ray Smith. Good afternoon, Ray.
Hello, Keith. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Very good.
Um, well, let's just get right into it. And you're going to introduce our special guest we have today.
I sure am. And I am so delighted to have this special guest with us today. Patricia Childs is the one that has arranged this and helped me to meet Marilou Awiakta. Did I get it even close, Marilou?
Not quite. It's Awiakta.
Awiakta, thank you very much. Marilou Awiakta. And I want to tell you a little about Marilou. She is an internationally known poet, essayist, and storyteller. She's a community activist, leader, and environmental advocate. And the connection that I made with her initially is that she grew up very near and part of the time in the city of Oak Ridge. And she has a Cherokee heritage, obviously, but she also was influenced, I believe, a significant amount by the time she was in Oak Ridge. And some of you may remember this book, Abiding Appalachia, that was written as a result of her experience in Oak Ridge. And she was also, in August of 2020, she was made a mark in national history as one of 10 women chosen from Tennessee and 500 women nationwide to be selected for USA Today's Women of the Century. Quite an honor that she received there. And then I'll mention one other book, the most recent book, I believe. And Marilou, I will probably not say this one correctly either, but I would say Selu, and I don't.
Well, you're exactly right.
Oh, I got it. I'm lucky.
You're exactly right.
And I have enjoyed looking through this and reading some of the poems. And I'm going to ask you to read some of your poems to us today because I think they're just marvelous. And I know that our audience will enjoy that. The one that comes to my mind right now is Where Mountain and Adam Meet. And that's a poem that I just enjoyed reading from. And you've got several others that are really good poetry. But let's start by going all the way back to your time in Oak Ridge and Abiding Appalachia. But let me encourage you. I've not done a really adequate job of introducing you. So if you would like to add to what I've said, please take the time to do that.
Oh, I think you've been very gracious. That's wonderful. We'll just roll right off.
All right.
Did you live in Oak Ridge too?
Yes, I still have a home in Oak Ridge, and I've been here for 53 years.
Well, I don't know. I came there in 1945, 2 days after Christmas.
Wow.
So, and I was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I came. That's when I came to Oak Ridge, and I'll tell you. Let me find this a little bit, and then I'll tell you. We'll go on.
Okay. Take your time.
Daddy was working. Daddy was working for the government. He was working for the National Youth Administration, and when the Manhattan Project was formed, the government just transferred him to the Manhattan Project, but there were no houses or anything there. So he commuted from Knoxville, which was about 18 miles, and he left at 5:30 in the morning and got home at 6:30 at night or 7. So I was very excited because we lived in Knoxville in an apartment, a tiny apartment, and we were on the list to get a house in Oak Ridge. So we were waiting 3 years for that. But let's leave us waiting for the house for a minute, and I want to go to the title of your program, Hidden History and Stories. Is it From the Secret City?
It is. That's correct.
Okay, well, my family has, there's Cherokee part, Scots Irish part, and some English part, have lived in East Tennessee since 1700. So it's our homeland. Those mountains are our homeland. And it struck me, thinking about you and your program and your titles, that if a person wanted to hide a secret, one of the best places would be to hide it in a bigger secret. And some people don't realize how big a secret the Great Smokies are and the Appalachian Range is. And I'll just use a little poetry there. When the Rockies rose sharp against the sky, the Appalachians were already mellowed down, mantled with forests, steeped in mist like ancients, deep in thought. And in my childhood, men brought the atom there to split it and release a power older than the earth, older perhaps than time itself. So my family and all our folks who grew up in the mountains were used to this ancient, mysterious way of the mountains. And they were never covered by ice. So all their root systems have been connected for, I don't know, thousands and thousands of years. Well, the interesting thing is, when the government was looking for a secret place to put a secret, they chose the Appalachians and East Tennessee, which was a secret place to begin with, and put Oak Ridge in there with 56,000 people and the big secret of developing the atom. And the mountains made a perfect camouflage for the city and for the secret of what was going on there, especially from the air. And I thought that was very smart of the government, and the secrecy of the place, the remoteness of it, was one of the reasons, as you know, as a historian, that they chose to put Oak Ridge there in East Tennessee. And of course, it was also part at one time of the Cherokee Nation. It was the Overhill part of the Cherokee Nation. So the family loves the mountains. My family been there a long, long time. And then here was something very new coming in, and Daddy was soon to be employed there. So this will make you chuckle. He said, now when we move in out there, when we get a house, I want to get some of our mountain boys to move us in, because they'll do the code of the hills when they move us in, and some of these newcomers may not know it. So we arrived in Oak Ridge and by bus, and looked up a long hill, and at the top there was a little curl of smoke, and Daddy said, that's our house, and we're going to walk up that hill to that house. Wow. And here, Ray, the architecture in Oak Ridge, as you know, was based on the basic cabin structure of Appalachia, the pitched roof and the front porch and the little stoop. And so we got there, and they had started a fire in the fireplace and set up all the beds, and then they had left so that we could come into our home privately. And that was our entry into Oak Ridge. A very interesting thing about the housing there was to us was, and different from other cities or places, is you were assigned a house according to how many children you had, not how much money you had. Nobody knew what your job was,
Right.
or they shouldn't. And so if you had one child, you had one extra bedroom. If you had two children, opposite sex, you got two bedrooms. And if you had three children, you had three bedrooms. And if you had four, you had a 4-bedroom house, but you better not have more than 4 because that's as high as it went. But anyway, here was the result. People of all different backgrounds, regions, professions lived together in a neighborhood because of the number of the children they had. So you all went to the school that was designated for your neighborhood. And it was very diverse. But the children all went to the school in there. It was like a pie. There were different neighborhoods. And as you know, the schools were, by demand of the scientists, excellent schools. But we all went to school together. And the only people who could know what their fathers did were people whose fathers were in, what the military calls the support personnel, like dry cleaners or a doctor or a pharmacist or a plumber. You could know that, but you absolutely could not ask a question about anybody, and no one was supposed to speak of the work they did at all, even if it was turning a screw. And there were FBI everywhere. We could spot the FBI man real well. And before I read the poem you requested, I just want to do a little funny poem.
Okay.
It's my mother calling through the house to me. Honey, run answer the door. Is it Fuller Brush, Jewel Tea, or the cleaner passing by? Oh, no, ma'am, it's none of them. It's just the FBI. And there'd be 2 guys standing there, and they would come in and they would ask questions about the neighbors, and different background questions. But that's how ubiquitous the FBI was when we were children, when we were 8 years old.
By the way, they still do that.
By the way, what?
By the way, they still come by and ask questions about your neighbors.
They do.
Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
If you have
Somebody's
yeah,
trying to get a job, and they have to have.
Oh, yeah, you got to get different clearances for different plants.
I had them come by to see me a couple of years ago.
Oh, those FBI guys are still there. Well, for goodness sakes,
Mm-hmm.
Some things are eternal.
That's true.
Let me read you the poem you wanted about the mountain.
all right.
Did you get that for me? Oh, okay. Where mountain and Adam meet. See what happened as I grew up in Oak Ridge and grew up with the atom in a natural way in science is all of these strands of my background began to weave together, the ethnic backgrounds and the experiential backgrounds. And I served in the Air Force in France for a while. And I began to see how it all wove together the way, for example, the Cherokee and the Scots Irish had the same way of thinking. A lot of mountain people did too, that everything is connected and that you better be respectful of nature or you will certainly pay for it. And so after I had lived a while and had some experience, I drew my thoughts together in this book, Abiding Appalachia. And here on the front of it, let's see is that on camera?
It is, yes.
This is an emblem of my life and work, and it's the little deer, sacred story of the Cherokee that teaches the principle of respect for everything in nature and for people, for all of the earth. And so I made this medallion in the belief, that conviction that if we have respect for each other and for the earth and all the way down to the atom, maybe we can reach a balance in time to have a happy life and a safe life. And here's the poem you requested: Where mountain and atom meet. Ancient haze lies on the mountain, smoke blue, strange and still. A presence that eludes the mind and moves through a deeper kind of knowing. It is nature's breath and more, an aura from the great I am that gathers to its own spirits that have gone before. Deep below the valley waters, eerie and hid from view, the atom splits without a sound. Its only trace, a fine blue glow rising from the fissioned hole, and at its core, power that commands the will, quiet that strikes the soul. Be still and know I am, and that's in quotation marks. Now that I wrote that, I was with Dr. Keim from the lab, and he took me to see the high flux reactor, where the core of the reactor is in water, pure water, and a pale blue glow rises from it called Cherenkov's fire. And sometimes it's called the swimming pool reactor. And some of the scientists, like, Richard Feynman was a scientist, was always making jokes, and he called it the Godiva reactor. Remember the story of Godiva that rode nude through the city? But anyway, officially, it was the high flux. And,
that was Dr. Chris Keim is the one that took you in there, Dr.
Correct. He was the director of the stable isotope division and a friend of the family. And he took me on a research, when I was on a research trip there. And here's a funny thing. The line, be still and know, and then I am, is the I is capitalized and the AM is capitalized. It's all in quotes. So a student somewhere said, Miss Awiakta, are you saying you're like God, I am? I said, no, pay attention to your punctuation, young person. When I am is capitalized like that, it means God. It doesn't mean me. The great I am, you need to read your scripture, said, be still and know I am. And that's when you look at the reactor working in water, you feel it's the power of the universe. It's very awe-inspiring. But I thought it was funny. The student didn't know the rules of capitalization, so he was chastising me for acting like God. I thought that was funny.
Well, they're young. They just have to learn.
That's right. One thing I've been thinking about a lot, about hidden history. Most of the books I've read about Oak Ridge naturally focus on the project and the mission of the project and developing the atom bomb and who was there and so forth. And that's a natural thing. But all of the families and the children were there. There are 56,000 people there, and very little is written about how the families dealt with this secrecy and this pressure on the father and the children, living within the big fence and having to have a badge to get in and out and everything. And so what Abiding Appalachia does is sort of go among the residents and see what the attitudes were and what people were thinking, and how life developed there.
Well, the interesting thing, Marilou, about Oak Ridge, and you're talking about the numbers of people that were there, the size of the area that was taken, and it's easy to get numbers mixed up. So please understand that the acreage that was taken is somewhere around, started out to be around 56,000 acres, wound up being closer to 60,000 acres.
No, sir, I didn't say acres. I said people.
I know it, and it actually started out to be what they thought was just going to be a few thousand people, but by 1945, August of 1945, there were 75,000 people living in the city of Oak Ridge. Those numbers always get confused. There were 80,000 people working there, 75,000 people living there, 60,000 acres. Those numbers get confused a lot.
Right. So, well, thank you for straightening that out. So there were a whole lot of people, children, wives, families that were not in the top secret part, but were in the secret part, but not the labs and the plants and the laboratories. Thank you. That does straighten things out a lot. And
your point is really good. There are lots of people there. Almost all of them did not know what they were doing. The chemists would have known it, but the rest of the people were just doing something to help win the war.
That's right. And the families could not ask questions. And that, I imagine, caused some tension in the family, to have that. And I really feel a great admiration for my mother and the other women in the, should I call it the residential community, the civilian community that were not involved in the project work, who were building the community, knitting together the schools, the churches, making sure that children were assured they were safe and they were educated and calmed down. And that's a whole lot of specialized work. And many of the women there also had their degrees. The woman across the street was a geologist, for example, and her husband was in the secret work, but she was a prime factor in organizing, helping organize the church group. And the funny thing, a lot of people are surprised that there were churches in Oak Ridge, that people went to church. And because they were making a weapon that they were going to church. But, it's a simple way of looking at things. But the funny thing was, there were no church buildings. And you know how a frontier, that's why I called it growing up on the atomic frontier. A frontier is a playing field. It's leveled because you have very basic things and everybody has a task, and you've got to do the task that's set for you if you're a child or an adult or whatever. And it's a very kind of egalitarian feeling. Everybody's pulling together to make a place that's habitable and interesting. And you remember the chapel on the hill? They left one little chapel from a previous community, and for a while, when I was there in the 40s, another characteristic of a frontier is people use the buildings that are extant for multiple use. And like, say the Baptist would go through the church at 8, the Methodists at 9, the Episcopalians, and then the Jewish people, and then so forth. And then gradually We went into other buildings as they got built. So the Methodists, you remember when the high school was built up on the hill? It was the old high school,
Yeah.
the barracks. And down below was Jackson Square and the movie theater, the Ridge movie theater was part of it. So the Methodists, we went to Sunday school in the high school, ran down the hill for church, past all the romantic billboards for Gone with the Wind and no telling what else, into the movie theater where it was cool and had church. And so people weren't attacked. There weren't church buildings. That came later. That came after the work of the residents.
Right. It truly was a frontier town, and you're right, they took advantage of every structure that they had, but the Army did not build many churches. They built 3, the chapel on the hill, there's one in the east end of town and one in the west end of town. The one in the west end has burned, but the other 2 are still there. Now, there were a couple of church buildings that were there from the previous community, and they used those buildings as well. And in fact, there were some schools that were there, the one out at school and the one down at Wheat, and they used those buildings. But
yeah, that's a characteristic of the frontier. I went to the one Jefferson Junior High.
Yeah.
And that was one of those buildings. Also.
Yeah, that's right. And for those that are thinking, what's she talking about? She's talking about the Robertsville School that's now a part of Robertsville Middle School. But when she was there, that school was the Jefferson Junior High.
Yep.
That's right. That's right. It was, and here, you know, how one of the things that's trending now that people are talking about is being in the green. How nature's noises, green noises, relax the brain and make it more creative and everything. That's why it's important to be out in nature some. And there's even a product now that you can buy called Green Noise that you can play in your bedroom when you go to bed, and ostensibly it will relax your brain. But anyway, here's the thing about all of us children. All we had was a record player, a telephone that was a party line, and a radio. There was no television, any kind of screen or anything like that. So we played outside nearly all the time. And there was woods everywhere. There were woods. 4 minutes, I could be in the deep woods of a hollow or out the front door, deep woods. So we children were in the green a lot of the time. And so we were outdoors and playing, you know, on rope swings and playing in the woods and making up games. Of course, we made up war games. That was one thing we did.
Yeah, the war was going on. It was on everybody's mind.
When you got up in the morning, one of the adults would say, well, wonder how our boys are today. And they'd turn on the radio and we'd all get around the breakfast table and listen to see how our boys were. And that's how close people felt to our troops. Well, nearly everybody had somebody serving in the military.
Right, they did. You're right. And it was a very close-knit community because of the common purpose. All the people there, even the people who had to leave their homes, many of them came back and got jobs in Oak Ridge.
That's true.
That was not only the Appalachian people who were there, but people coming in from all over the nation were gathering together there. And you're right, it was a wide mix of a variety of backgrounds of people put together, and the children would have been in the school together.
Right, and the standards in the schools were very high of academic standards, what you were supposed to learn and do. You know, for everybody who went, there weren't any private schools or private clubs or anything like that.
Well, now, is there other poetry that you'd like to share with us? You've written a lot of different styles of poetry. Did you have some in mind you'd like to share? I didn't mean to mislead you on that one, but
No, I'm glad you liked that one. And it was funny, wasn't it? How I am threw a student off.
it
Thought
did.
I was taking liberties I shouldn't.
All right.
There is one, and this is tied to something else about stories about Oak Ridge, that there were a lot of incipient studies going on preparing for the time of peace. For example, radiation therapy, using the atom for heat, using it for archaeology for age, measuring age of things. There were little things like that, but the one I want to read a poem about is the radiation therapy, and it was referred to as the atomic cocktail that they were developing to help treat cancer, even while the war was going on. That was going on a little bit, but I had a vision one time of a poem. Because I listened to a TV program from Harvard. Dr. Gail Mann was speaking, and he said every atom has in it a photon, and that photon is the same material as the star in the sky. It's the same, but it's on a minute level. And I kept that in my mind. One night I was out sitting against the pine tree, and I had this vision, and it was this star vision. As I sat against the pine one night beneath a star-filled sky, suddenly in every tree, in every hill and stone in my hand, lying prone upon the grass, I could see each atom's tiny star. Minute millions, so far flung, so bright, they swept me up with earth and sky in one vast expanse of light. The moment passed. The tree was dark, the hill, the stone, and my hand was bone and flesh once more, lying on the grass. Now, I had a letter from a scientist who said, "This is a true vision. This is true vision you have had." And then in 1099, I had to have radiation therapy. And it was so comforting to me. Instead of thinking of poison going into my body to try to help me get well, I thought of stars, because in reality, it was stars going. It was photons is what they were treating me with the radiation. And so the radiologist, the head of the radiology department, said, "I'd like to use that poem in my office, blown up, so that anybody having radiation therapy can focus truly scientifically of what's going into their body. And it will be so much more helpful to them to think positively as stars, which it is stars because it's photons, than poison going in to kill the cancer." And so that poem has been used quite a bit medicinally, to help people. And it's a true thing. It is the photons. And I have another poem that I was asked to compose by the National Conference of Christians and Jews and for a peace conference. And I based it on the removal of the Cherokee, you know, when they were removed in 1838 and the nation swept away, the culture, everything swept to the west, and so many people died. But the Cherokee had in 1821, after Sequoyah had developed the alphabet, had their own newspaper. Remember, it was called the Cherokee Phoenix.
Right.
And the Phoenix was one of the emblems of the Cherokee. So in this prayer for peace, I utilized that, and then I'll tell you what happened. It's called "Out of Ashes, Peace Will Rise." Our courage is our memory. Out of ashes, peace will rise if the people are resolute. If we are not resolute, we will vanish. And out of ashes, peace will rise. Our courage is our memory. And I was thinking about my parents and all the way back the generations, how people on the frontiers of whatever besets them had been resolute and gone on working and gone on with courage. And that's where the line came from. Our courage is our memory. Remembering those who have stood with courage is very heartening to the next generation. And so then in 2020, a French couple wanted to do a book of my poetry and do it in French and English with illustrations. And they wanted to call it "Our Courage is Our Memory," because they said globally, everybody of whatever ethnicity understands that memory of those who have had courage helps you have courage in the present. And so our courage is our memory is something I would want to pass along to anybody today for their own family and their own experience, to look back and draw strength from those who, you know, stood firm and so they used to say soldiered through. Remember when people would say, "Now just soldier through that."
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the Great Generation got their name, I believe, because they had not only the war but the Depression to deal with. But I want to. There's another aspect, a humorous aspect of speaking of things that happen that you have to get used to. As a child in Oak Ridge, this is a typical example. I had a friend I loved so much. Her name was Monica, and she had beautiful red hair. And we were playing one Friday and having a big time. We were playing hopscotch, and we were about 13. And Saturday morning, I went down, knocked on the door, and nobody was there. And I looked through the window, and there was no furniture in the house. And I went next door, and the neighbor said the security came during the night, and they were totally moved out. Mm-hmm. And they must have broken some security or something, because they had told us nothing, but they're gone. Everything is moved. And that's very shocking to a child, you know, to live where, but that was part of the reality. And also we had the disaster drills. Did you ever have us a disaster drill? You weren't a child there.
No.
We once a week would, in case of a bombing or in case of an accident at the lab, we had drills where we had to leave the school and go jump in a ditch and, or get against the wall where the glass would blow against another wall. But my mother, being a long-standing mountain family, said, well, Marilou, that's good to have those things. It gives you a sense that you can do something. But given the power of the atom, if it gets close enough to blow the glass on the other wall, you're not going to make it out. But you're given something to do to help you feel better. And that's pretty stark to tell a child, but that's part of a lot of mountain philosophy. If something's hard, you look at it and say, well, that's what it is. And so on we go.
Marilou, I have to tell this story, and Keith, you've heard it, so bear with me. But not too long ago, there was a false alarm in Hawaii that there was a nuclear missile headed toward Hawaii. I got a call from a television station in Knoxville saying, Ray, we'd like to come over and interview you to say what would happen if they got a notice that there was a nuclear missile headed toward Oak Ridge. I said, okay, come on over. I'll let you interview. When they got over there and set their camera up, they asked me that question. And I said, well, I just kiss this old world goodbye because I'm going to be vaporized in a few minutes. Needless to say, they did not put that on television.
But I would have laughed with you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a fact. If it happened, it ain't going to be long. It'll be quick.
Right. Oh, I have a funny story.
Okay.
How much time do we have?
Oh, we're good. Go ahead with your story.
Okay.
But that's good. We'll wrap up on that.
Okay. This funny story is two guys that were about 16. I'm going to change their names, Jim and Bill. They were geniuses, really. When we were all taking plane geometry, they were taking advanced trig, and they both spoke French. They mastered French in a year, and then they knew physics, they knew French. One of them played first chair flute in the band, and the other one played saxophone, and they were mischievous 16-year-olds. Well, they were on the phone for a nightly chat, and they heard the phone jack go in, the phone tap, so they knew the FBI was on. So what they decided to do is play a joke on the FBI. And so they began speaking in French as if they were spies, and they knew enough trig to make up the math. Yeah. And they went on with this thing like they were trading secrets, and then they hung up, and in 30 minutes, both of them were picked up. One of them's dad was head of a laboratory there in Oak Ridge. He was picked up, and the other one's father, something with AEC, he was up in Washington. FBI got him at the airport, and the next morning, all four of them were interrogated extensively. And those boys were scared out of their minds.
That backfired on them, didn't it?
It backfired, but they were just full of hijinks and life. They thought, well, we'll just play with the FBI, but like we used to say, you don't mess with the government, man.
Not a good idea.
It's true.
Oh, mate. Well, Marilou, we really do appreciate you being on here with us and sharing your stories and poetry. Some really wonderful poems that you shared with us today.
Thank you. It was wonderful for me too. And I just like to say I've met so many fine young people that really have the future at heart and want to make a better future. And we're facing the frontier of AI now, and that's going to have to be dealt with very firmly. So I'll just leave with one line. Remember, out of Out of ashes, peace will rise. Our courage is our memory. Find out your roots, weave them together, and go to work.
All right.
Excellent. That's a good way to wrap it up. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you very much. Ray, do we have somebody scheduled for our next time?
We do. You'll remember Todd Ryder, who talks to us about the German scientists that are at the basis of almost everything that we think about and know today. The forgotten, what does he call it? It's not forgotten heroes, forgotten scientists, forgotten something that he has written a huge book about.
6,000 pages.
Yeah, I know it. And
Wow.
I'm so sorry that I'm messing up on the title, but Todd will correct me
Okay.
and we'll have another session with him about some probably, well, for sure, some things that we don't know about that he has discovered that correlates to German scientists.
And if people want to, kind of go back and rewatch we've had him on several times so far.
Yeah.
They can go to YouTube, to our channel, Hidden History Stories from the Secret City, and just search for Todd Ryder, Rider. And so you could watch those before the new one that comes up in a couple of weeks. So
Is the title History Stories from the Secret City? Is that the title to look it up under?
Hidden History Stories from the Secret City.
All right, good.
So,
Good.
Anyway. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy it. And remember Nanyehi, I know you've had Becky Hobbs on doing the great Cherokee leader, Nancy Ward, will be opening soon in your end of the state. So
all right.
Be sure to see her.
We had a wonderful time with her, and she has really taken that idea of peace and using her Nancy Ward musical to promote the importance.
Yes, she is. We're friends, we're friends.
She's a very special lady. And Keith, the name of his book is Forgotten Creators.
Forgotten Creators.
I looked him up when you were talking, so it's
right.
Todd Ryder, and he's with the Institute, the Ryder Institute, and the name of the book that he's going to be talking about is Forgotten Creators: How German-Speaking Scientists and Engineers Invented the Modern World.
All right. Very good. All right, folks. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Bye-bye.